Welcome to Haven, the podcast, where we explore the vast landscape of loss. There's no going over or around grief. We're going to take it piece by piece and navigate these tough topics the only way we know how, by going through it. This podcast discusses miscarriage, pregnancy, infant, and child loss, so please listen with care. Silent mystery. Hello and welcome, Lindsey. This is a very exciting day over here at the Landscape of Loss Pod because we are doing our first video interview. We have not been on video. So obviously, if you're watching, right? And if you're listening to wherever you get your podcasts at, just know that you can head over to our YouTube channel. We'll link that for you and you can go ahead and see this episode video version. So you can see Lindsey's smiling face. So welcome, Lindsey. Lindsey Henke is joining us for the second time. She joined us a while back, but she has been working on something. And you know what? I believe that we promised our listeners that we would share more about your book when it came out. And here we are. So
thank you, Jen, for having me on again. My smile today is because I'm a little nervous being the first one on video, but we'll get through it.
We will. It's just like audio only, right? It's the same. Oh gosh. Well, if you guys don't remember, Lindsey is the founder of PAL. We call PALs, right? And we are so honored to have you on again. You are just doing such amazing work and important work in honor of your daughter, Nora. And we're so grateful to have you, and head back and listen to the episode with Nora, and you can, with Lindsey's story of Nora, and you can find that information and her story there. So, Lindsey, tell us a little bit about the book that you have recently put out and published.
Yeah, so it's called When Skies Are Gray, A Grieving Mother's Lullaby. Here it is. They did a great job on the cover. Isn't it beautiful?
Beautiful. Beautiful. See, if you guys are watching the video, you can see this.
It's the video. Yeah. So I actually set out after Nora died, and I think I said this in my other interview, to write a book. And that came about because right after we found out that Nora was going to be stillborn. So we went, just a quick recap, we went to the hospital at 40 weeks and 4 days, expecting Nora to be delivered into the world without any complications. And we got ready and hooked up to monitors to start delivery and labor. And the nurse went silent and went and got the doctor. And the doctor came back with the portable ultrasound and said, "I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat." Right? And the words we all bereaved parents never want to hear, part of the club we don't want to be a part of. And in my grief, I kind of intuitively threw myself into writing. So writing became, along with therapy, a way for me to attend to my grief, nurture my grief, and really continue that connection with Nora. I know a lot of bereaved mothers do this and grieving mothers, but I started writing her letters, and then I started a blog where I kind of processed my emotional experience going through the loss. And then I even started the blog, then had a focus. So I started reading a lot of books too, which is called like bibliotherapy. And I read this book called The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. Did you ever read that book?
Yes, I've heard of it. I have not read the whole thing, but I've heard of it.
It was popular right around the time that Nora passed away. And this is all in the book, but I decided I didn't want to be sad. So I tried to read the book the farthest away from being a sad, grieving mother. And it was The Happiness Project early in my grief. And I was like, and then eventually I was resigned and said, I am sad. I'm very sad. And so I started the Grief Project instead of the Happiness Project. And what I did is in my blog, I started using my therapy techniques about grief and grieving in the therapeutic community on myself monthly to help me get through to help lay a landscape, as you would say, pathway forward to figure out how to move forward in life. And when I mean move forward, not without Nora, but just like how to hold the weight of this grief, how to process it, how to integrate it, how to make sense of my world in the after, no longer in the before. And writing was a big tool of that. It was in the blogging, it was in the letters I sent her. And so at some point in my grieving process, I realized I wanted to write a book, because that's what a lot of grieving mothers have done. It just the setting out to write the book actually created so many other things that entered the world sooner and might even be more impactful than the book itself. So it's kind of like the culmination of the thing I set out to do that actually created all these other things, like PALS, pregnancy after loss support, which was developed because, and I said this before briefly, when I was writing in my grief about Nora on bereavement blogs, nobody wanted to hear about the subsequent pregnancy, or when I become subsequently pregnant again. And then when I was writing, I got picked up for Pregnancy and Newborn Magazine's weekly blogger at the time, which is a national magazine. And I was that doesn't talk about loss; it just talks about all pregnancy. And they were expanding into the area of loss, and
Mm.
they do more so now. Every mainstream outlet seems to talk more about loss, which is great. But as I was writing more about my subsequent pregnancy, that community didn't want to hear about the sadness and stillbirth and miscarriages. So what happened out of all that writing, of wanting to write a book, which was writing articles for all these different outlets, was actually that PALS came to be because I wanted a place where it's basically like the bump, but for sad parents like us who wanted a place to talk about holding both grief and joy and hope and fear during our subsequent pregnancies. And then that blossomed into a national nonprofit, and we have an app now too. But then so many other things happened along the way, like meeting friends, lifelong long friends, and you know, I'm sure there's things for you that evolved that way as well that you can relate to. And then the book just was something I said I'd set out to do and complete, and I did. And I do think part of it, like I've said in other interviews for the book, it's also a way when I had younger children. So my two subsequent children were 2 and 4 when I wrote it, and we were actually living in Germany. So that would have been like 5 years after Nora died. And we were living there for my husband's job. He was deployed, and we went together. Luckily, we got lucky that way. And so the kids were in daycare because it was the only time respite we would get because we didn't have any family there. And so for the 10 months we were there, I wrote the book. And it was a way amongst parenting two young children that I still got to kind of keep her as part of the family. I got to keep that conversation with Nora going. She had her special time in our life together, just me and her. And so it's actually kind of sad that the book is over. I smile, but people keep asking me, like, how do you feel? And I'm like, I actually feel kind of sad. And I feel like most
Mm.
people would feel sad at this point when, like, you've launched the thing into the world and now what? But for me, it's also like that's where I got to have the conversation, even in the edits that have happened since the writing of the first draft and the re edits and other chapters that were added. That's where I got to have the conversation and continue the connection with Nora. So I think that was the other big piece of it for me in writing the book. There's a way to be with her.
Absolutely. And you know what? I will say I have started reading the book. I'm several chapters in, but I really wasn't sure what to expect. But what I have found that I love about it is so many of the things that you say and that you share are about your pregnancy and finding out about being pregnant with Nora and what that did to your relationship and your marriage and, you know, your concerns about motherhood and fears, right, surrounding that. Because there's so much that goes into a pregnancy. And I think sometimes we, you know, rush right to the birth story when we're met with new children, right? And it's like, gosh, but you have such a beautiful and deep relationship with your child throughout pregnancy, right? All throughout that entire time we're finding out you're pregnant, you know, going through to these appointments, the worries, right? The nervousness about becoming a mother and at all. And so I think it's so great so far as I am in the story, in the book, is seeing that, because I can look at it and be like, oh my gosh, that's right. Yes, I remember feeling this way or that way. And I remember, some of these hopes and some of these dreams, and not to give anything away, but even just your explanation and kind of talking about how you came to her name, the name Nora, and how in the back of your head, you're like, gosh, what if she doesn't get to use it? But you can't say that out loud, right? You can't say that out loud. So I so appreciate that, because I think when I think even on my pregnancy with Henry, when I'll share his name, they'll say, oh, it's so beautiful. Aren't you so sad you didn't get to use it? And I'm like, well, I am using it. I'm continuing to use it. I use his name quite a bit. And so it's so interesting. And anyways, it was so great to hear you share bit by bit, how that pregnancy and how your love for her grew through that time. So it's not just about the loss, right? It's about her life. And I think that's amazing. So
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you get to use Henry's name a lot. I mean, that's part of the book, right? Is that like I was afraid, and there's no spoilers. Like everybody kind of knows the story. It's more about
mhm.
feeling validated in your own. But I had like moments of questioning, like would she get to use it? I'm a agnostic atheist. I'm questioning, but there's definitely like a spiritual connection I have with Nora throughout the book. And in the end, in the acknowledgments, I say my children are my spiritual teachers. Motherhood is my spirituality, is where I learned the most in life. Even if I
Mm.
was someone who knew right away that I wanted to be one. And I mean, that's what spirituality is in some ways, though. It tests us. It helps us become more of who we are. And my children, all of them, Nora included, have definitely done that for me. I recently, in regards to what you're saying about the falling in love with Nora, before we lost her, I recently played last 2 weeks ago, the Pregnancy and Infant Loss and Death Alliance conference. I taught a workshop on storytelling as a way in writing as a way of continuing the connection with your child that died, because I think we sometimes forget that, and I know we don't forget as grieving mothers and fathers, but as grieving outsiders witnessing our grieving, they sometimes forget that we lost a baby in pregnancy. That also doesn't mean like we had all of these memories with them, but just not enough. So we're grieving what was supposed to be, what was, and what would never be. And we fall in love before they arrive. And that was the big part of the workshop, is that we already have a connection to our babies. It's just that we don't get to see how that unfolds, or it doesn't unfold in the way we want. And that's really what I read about in the book, is how do I continue this relationship with Nora that I feel so deeply, even though she's not here. And, there's a name for that. That's the continued bonds theory as well. Researchers coined that term in the 90s, that it's not a get over grief method, but that it's how do we continue this relationship even when they're gone. So it's a real thing.
I love that. Yeah, because sometimes we need the continuing bonds theory. I love that. When I learned more about that, I think it kind of, in a way, feels like it validates a little bit, because you're like, well, I can't get over it. I can't get over it. So how am I going to live with this? Right. And so, being validated that that's not the best option, and that there is a way through it, where you can continue to love your child and you can continue to feel connected or close to them. I think especially, when you talk about loss when it happens abruptly, right? I mean, you were not prepared. No one's prepared typically in situations like ours. And, it wasn't like this long, year over year illness or disease, right? It just all of a sudden your life was one way, and then the next day your life was completely different. And I know that you speak a little bit about that and about the perspective that it gives you, and how kind of life has been separated, or for me too, it's from the before to the after, right? Well, that was before Henry, and this is all after. And it's like this line drawn in the sand. And it just marks, it's like a time marker in your life. And it's so odd, because you just don't ever think that something like that's going to happen. And then it does. And then it's there. Right. So,
Yeah, I would say it's even drawn in stone. Like it doesn't feel like sand, right? Like it's a definitive moment. In
mm-hmm,
most people's lives with a prominent figure, where it's sudden, or if it's even if it's not sudden, it's this idea that
mm-hmm,
like that was the life I used to live. I mean, in pregnancy and pregnancy after loss, we talk about that. It's like that was the innocent me, the me that didn't know the pain or the ache of missing this person, or that life could be so full of longing, um, and heartbreak in this after, and or when life doesn't go as planned, and that's what
yeah.
happens who lose our children.
Right. And I think I love your story too, because I think so many people like me, and you go through this loss, this unexpected loss, right? Whatever it is. And you feel so alone, regardless of who's around you, right? You're just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I literally feel like I'm the only person on this earth that understands what I'm going through. And to read your words from another mom who has been through it and clearly is still going through it, right? I mean, it's so comforting. It's such a comforting book, because you can look at it and be like, no, she gets it. This other human gets it. That means that there are other people out there who are going through this or have gone through this, and they're creating something beautiful out of their loss and something horrific that happened to them. And just that sense of not being alone, I think, is created in storytelling.
For sure. And the power of storytelling is like, as I've been learning more about it, to teach others about it as well, and how to use it in our community to help, writing to heal, or in this case, writing to continue the connection, is like, if you can't make something better, make it beautiful. And that's what I tried to do with this story, right? Like, and I heard that in one of my writing classes, but it's very much, I'm trying to make the time that Nora and I had together, and even after missing her, because I described my grief over and over as love. That's always been how I see it. If you can't make it better, make it beautiful. And that's where we have that agency to do that, through writing and through storytelling. And the other benefit of storytelling is like what you do here on the landscape of loss, which is you help people feel less alone. You help people feel seen. And that's what I hope the book does. For me, I gravitated towards book format because it's also a type of therapy for me. It was intuitively how I healed, how I continued the connection with Nora. But what I want other people to do is feel seen and validated in their grief, especially since I work now as a perinatal loss therapist with so many people over the last 10 years in this field, that I really know intricately, like not just personally, but professionally, the themes, the challenges, the things we face. And I want people to know that, because a lot of times people come to me and be like, am I crazy? No, you're not crazy. This is safe, right? This is a normal experience for your abnormal experience of living life after your child died, or being pregnant after a loss, right? So I was really hoping to convey some of that validation from my own experience, so other people could feel that in theirs. But what also, the reason I gravitated towards a book, like I was saying earlier, is podcasts just weren't around 12 years ago when
Mm-hmm.
my loss. But I mean, yours and everybody else's that had bereaved mom or grieving mom in the title, I would have turned on right away, searching for someone who
Exactly.
show me that I am not going to be alone. Like you said, you feel like in this depths of this pit and this hole, and you're all alone and nobody's there to throw you a rope. But your podcast, these books, they're a lifeline. Like my lifeline, like within, it's in the book too, like within, the day after her funeral, which is 5 days later, I was devouring memoirs. My lifeline, and it still is the exact replica of A Figment of My Imagination by Elizabeth McCracken that came out. I don't know when it exactly came out, but her story took place a couple of years before mine. And that was, I just needed to see someone else who wasn't still in the pit and learned how to live and carry this grief as love, in order to know that I could be okay someday too.
That's so true. I did the same. Yeah. I tried really hard to create a platform that was something that I needed at that time, and something that other moms have communicated that they needed. And the thing I love about your book, and yeah, I have not read that book, but folks that continue to write their stories and publish these stories for people to find, is that these are contemporary views and thoughts on grief, right? I mean, because we were all okay dating ourselves. We were all alive in the 80s, right? And the mentality was truly everything happens for a reason. Just shut it down and move on, and that was what it was. And there really hadn't been a ton of contemporary grief resources, I didn't feel like, at least that were presented to me. Right. And so when I started to find them, I was just like, okay, yes, this is it. That people need to be writing these things. This is the narrative that needs to be out there. The It's Okay That You're Not Okay, right? By Megan Devine, phenomenal book. Some other ones are fantastic as well. And I just think those are the books that need to be, whether they're gifted to these families, whether they're, more mainstream, right? We always say that because everyone will know someone that loses a child, right? And so if you are armed with resources and websites and things like that that are going to actually help them, I think that's so important for everybody to have, regardless of whether you've experienced a loss or not. Imagine if your best friend showed up at your door with a stack of like the books that you consider the ones that got you through, right? Like what a gift that would
Yeah,
be.
no, I reference a lot of the books that got me through. I've been meaning to do a post on that because they're all in there. Because it was, again, we feel communion in story, right? And
Mm-hmm.
connection. And so, and especially in a story that's like ours. So this is for anybody who has lost a child, really, or sees themselves in versions of my story. But I'm sure if you're a stillbirth mom, you're going to relate more. If you go on to become subsequently pregnant, you're going to relate more. When I work with clients, I often tell them, find people with your story. Find people with your story as close to your story as you can get. I relate to a lot of people in losing their pregnancies and babies whose stories are different than mine. We can connect in that way. But I also feel like in the beginning, it's really important to find people who have been through as close to what you've been through, as closest to what you've been through, so that you can feel like you're not going to be stuck in the pit forever.
I agree. And I love that, circling back to what you had said about your clients saying, am I crazy? Right? I mean, how many times do, lost parents ask themselves that, right? Am I crazy? Like, I'm losing it here. Because sometimes society can tell us one thing, right? And then we're like, well, I feel so much different than
Mhm.
what I'm being shown that I should feel, right? And so I think that's such a normal question. And I know that PALS does put out some of my favorite posts, which are the perfectly normal in pregnancy after loss. And you can kind of swipe through the tiles and see these things. And I will just sit there and nod my head and just go, yep, 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 those feelings are valid. Yep, you're going to feel weird about this. Yep. And it's just like, oh, man, that's all we want, right? Is just someone to maybe tell you that you're not going off the deep end and you're going to make it. But also holding space for you to sit with your grief as long as you need to in whatever way it's showing up that day. So I
Yeah.
think that's phenomenal. So how, highlights wise, I mean, how did you decide, what to include in the book, what to not include in the book? Was it hard to kind of pick apart, or were you pretty sure about what you wanted the story to look like, or to the length and the content?
So it was written over 5 years. So I was trying to remember. But I think I'm no Cheryl Strayed, but like, did you ever read The Wild or Wild?
No, uh-uh.
So it came out actually right around the time that I lost Nora. That's when it was published that year in like 2013
Okay.
and 2014. And so Cheryl Strayed wrote this bestseller that Reese Witherspoon made into a movie called Wild. And then it takes place on the Pacific Northwest Trail, where she is in her 20s. It's all a true story. It's a memoir. In her 20s, she's going on this hike to process the grief of losing her mother. right? And then there's flashbacks, and then it's also about hiking this trail and processing grief. I couldn't read it actually after Nora died, but then I read it many years later. I was too much in my grief, and her story didn't relate enough to mine for me to see the connections. But later, when I had widened the lens on my grief, or grown and found footing in my own grief, I was able to digest her story. But the reason I bring it up is because I was blown away that she wrote that story when she was 40, about when she was 20, right? And the way she did it is that she actually journaled the whole time she was on the trail. And then what's wild is I realized mine was kind of the same way. So like I blogged the whole, when I was in the depths of it, that whole first year and second year of my grief journey after losing Nora. And all those blogs are awful. They're like, they're just, like, I mean, they're not awful, but they're not like, they're not compiled into a book, right? They're very much cathartic, what I felt in the moment. And a lot of people have found them helpful and relatable, and have found me over the years through them. But what I think is, like, I had written this story over and over and over again in many formats and trying to digest it, that eventually I knew the parts that were important, which was mostly like what I did. I was telling my sister the other day as we were talking about the book, is I kind of picked out, and I wonder if you noticed this, the chapter titles are kind of sayings in the lost community, right? If you go through it, like,
Yep.
what is like, God did it, or God needed another angel bullshit, or like everything happens for no reason at all, or another one is like a sibling and not a replacement. I'm trying to recall the title, or I'll always wonder who you would have been, as like the opening line. So I went with those sayings that really resonated within the community and with me, and and talked about them kind of like short essays, like what was happening in my life that relates to those. And of course my writing coach was like, write it chronologically, because that's the way it's going to make most sense. But that's how I kind of figured out what to write about, was kind of what would other people relate to and what was really important to me. I chose to write it as like if I was telling Nora the story in her bedroom, which is how it opens with, I wonder who you would have been, or um, I'll always wonder who you would have been. But I've talked about this before too. So when I was writing it, my daughter was 4, my subsequent child, right? So it was kind of like this combination of the life I got to live with Zoe and this imagined life of what it would have been like to live that with Nora if she came first, right? So like the bedroom I write about in that scene is my daughter's bedroom. It's the bedroom that was supposed to be Nora's, but it ended up being Zoe's. There are glow in the dark stars on the ceiling. There is a quilt that you'll circle back around to in the end that the kids actually have that we're laying under. There's an elephant that was Nora's only stuffy, that became hers and known as the Nora elephant, that we have in all of our family photos. And we did up until that point that represented her. So she's holding that elephant in that imagined future. So I really played around with like what could have been, and then and how I wish things would have been. And then I wrote as if I was telling her our love story, and that started with falling in love with her dad. And then of course it fell apart, but then how does that continue after a loved one is gone?
It's it's beautifully written, and I also noticed right away, of course, the "You Are My Sunshine" song,
Yeah.
moments and quotes from that song, and that one resonated with me because I used to sing that one to my daughter, and then right, you're like, oh shoot, this is like a sad song, right?
It was, yeah.
And I'm just like, oh. And one day my daughter goes, Mommy, don't sing that anymore. It's too sad. It's like,
That's really insightful.
yeah, I was like, oh, yeah, it is kind of sad. I'm like, well, I really love that song. And anyways, I think it's so funny that the things that kids pick up on too. But I love how you wove that in there. I think it's so beautiful because I think we all write that the lyrics of that song are so popular, right? When you think of like childhood nurseries, right? Like with quotes from that on quotes. I keep saying quotes with lyrics from that song as wall hangings or what have you. And so, but yeah, when you actually listen to the whole thing, you're like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah, well, I actually settled on it because I also came about this idea, like, so yes, I'm telling Nora our love story, but like, I was going to name the book Lullaby. And so I started researching like lullabies and their history. And that's a little bit in the beginning. You probably read that part, but I read like
I
a whole book
did.
to understand
Yeah.
it. But
Hmm.
the idea that it's actually like, so and it's very therapeutic in nature. Like lullabies are supposed to be like co-regulations between mother and child, but lullabies are often dark, right? But we sing them in these sing-songy voice, like Rockabye Baby, right? But it's almost a
Yes.
cradle falling, which is this terrible thing. Um,
Right.
when my subsequent child was born, we would change the lyrics to "Mommy and Daddy will catch Zoe" or whatever, cradle and all, because it was just too
Yep.
like, felt like I was going to jinx it from everything that had happened, which is talked about my anxiety in the book as well. But
Mm-hmm.
it's this terrible song, but we sing it because we're vocalizing our fears and worries with them, but in a way that they can digest them. Like how we share everything with children is like in little bits that are developmentally appropriate, right? And that's the first
Mm-hmm.
doing that. And so it's this co-regulation piece. So I was like, okay, I'll call it Lullaby. But then I wanted to incorporate, instead of the titles that I have, which are more loss focused, and the sayings in the lost community, like we talked about, I was going to do all these different lullabies. But then the one I kept coming back to was You Are My Sunshine, because it's like the happiest, saddest song that you'll ever hear. And that's very much what losing a baby is, right? It's the happiest, saddest story you'll ever hear.
Oh, yes. Exactly. Exactly. It is. So I, again, I can't stress enough just so far how beautiful the book is. And I love the way that you've created. I love how much thought has gone into the presentation of it. And just that it is, you're exactly right. Like you said, it is a love story. It's a lullaby. It's all of these things. And I think, gosh, I will say too, as I was reading it, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember these feelings so deeply. And I remember wanting to write all of my feelings down, but
Mhm.
it never registering to me to have to put pen to paper and do it. Right.
Mhm.
And it'd be so amazing to go back. And so I do always, and I'm going to do it right now, make a plug for folks listening. If you are in that tough spot, if you're in the depths of grief, or if you're years out, write, write, write those feelings down, because I think it's so beautiful to go back and visit them also and read, like you said, your blog posts that you're like, oh gosh, what a mess. But truly imagine, thinking about what a different place you're in now, right? And it it's just, it's amazing to look at and to see what you've created from that, from all of that pain and all of that tragedy and suffering, and then to create something beautiful from that
Mhm.
is just amazing. And not everyone gets the opportunity to do that, so I'm so glad that you did.
Well, thank you, Jen. I do think, though, the one takeaway, though, is that this is kind of just a blueprint or validation that, like, everybody has a love story that can continue on with their child that died, no matter how long they were here. And that love matters.
It does. It does. I mean, is that, and do you think, are you hoping that that's kind of what your readers will take away from this book? Or what was your when you had to think about your audience and think about who's reading this, and of course you have hopes and dreams for how they'll respond to it, I would imagine, right?
So it's a weird experience for me. Like, I will have to say, I wrote the book for me and for me to connect with Nora. And then I was like, oh, my writing coach is like, you should publish it and see if it'll get picked up. And I was like,
Oh.
okay. So any good, and it was good enough. But my hope for the reader perspective is to feel that validation. And one of the things has come true where, like, one person who had read it, like, left a comment and said, this is, I love your book, and something about, like, it makes me think about my love story with their baby's name, or like they talked about their baby's name in the way of like talking about their own love story. And that really made me happy because when I've looked at it, I'm like, well, why did I write the book? And it was really about continuing that connection with her. And I think that's what I want people to walk away from, is that their babies matter. They were real. They did exist, and their love for them still matters. And hope that you're not going to be in the deep, dark pit forever. But at first, you have to be sad, and first, you have to live there for a while um, before you can maybe see life differently.
And I think it's okay to be in that space for longer than I think, right? Society encourages us to be.
Totally.
Um, right? Like kind of thinking about, oh, you're a month out. Well, you back to work or you trying again? Or, it's just like, whoa, slow it down. And I think, I hope that people find this kind of in that space so I hope they find books like this. I hope they find other books that they can take and encourage them to slow down and just live each moment and experience each moment. Because I just feel like if you don't do it, it's going to all come screaming back at you in the future. Right, whenever you're not ready for it. I think if you don't process some of it, it's going to come back for you, right? It's going to come back around.
Well, I mean, that's my job as a therapist, is to help people process and be with their grief. So yes, I do agree with you. I also think it's important to have validation, to honor your grief as love and know that your grief is intuitive. My intuitive way of processing my grief was writing. If you get farther in the book, you'll realize that my husband's way was moving his body and running. Everybody has their own way. Your way was to help others through the work you do.
Hmm.
In Henry's name, everybody has, and you don't have to do any of those things. It could even be like, when you get farther in the book, and I've written about this before, in separate essays, you'll find out that once I start to lose connection with her along the way, like between the like trying to parent a living baby and being subsequently pregnant, I worry about staying connected to Nora. And how do you do that in a way that's not as intense when you have other responsibilities in life, right? Like I didn't have this focused time to write as much as I did because I was back to work and I was pregnant and doing other things. And so the way you can even stay connected is like I still do sometimes. I write her name on the dew upon the shower door every morning. So we continue that connection in so many ways. And it doesn't have to be writing a book. It could be talking to our babies each day, in our mind, or saying, I wish you were there. Or like some of my clients, they hang prisms, rainbow prisms in their windows, or have bird feeders outside their windows. It could be little everyday things too that continues that bond of attachment after they're gone. But that bond matters, that love matters. And that's what I hope people walk away with.
Oh, that's so perfect. That even just gave me good ideas just for my own self. So, right? I mean, I think that's so beautiful. Those are amazing ways to do that and to maintain that connection. So, I think that's so hard. And I know that you guys do speak on that a fair amount, about what that looks like, right? Parenting after loss, and right, the pregnancy after loss is definitely one thing. And then parenting after loss continually, and how you maintain the child that's not with you within your family, like the ways that you mentioned, with your family photos and things like that, because it can be so hard. Um, and those are all really great ideas. So
Yeah, it
I'm
is
so
really.
grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful for this book and for everything that you are doing. What's up next for you? Any, you just finished this huge thing. What's next? What are you doing now?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to, like you use the term slow down. I do think I'm definitely at midlife. So the book happened when I was 30, and I'm now, it happened when I was 30 and 31, and I'm now 40 and 41. So it's a different stage of life for sure. Midlife,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out what's next. So I'm really just sitting with that question myself. I don't know.
That
But,
is a perfect place to be.
yeah.
We don't have to know.
We
Well,
don't have.
that's amazing. How can we find this book? Where can we purchase it from? And how do we support you?
Sure. You can find it where all good books are sold. And if you could leave a review on wherever you purchase it from, Amazon, or, Barnes and Noble, or wherever you purchase it, leave a review. And then also leave a review on Goodreads. Share a picture that you have bought it and you are reading it and how it impacts you. That'd be great.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Goodreads. Yes, I love Goodreads. I didn't think of that. Absolutely. We'll go check that out. So we will have links in our show notes for all of that.
Great.
Yes, as well as to the PALS website. We will include a link over there so that folks can find you over there. So
That's great.
well, thank you so much, Lindsey, for coming on again. I so appreciate our chat, and I so appreciate what you're doing, of course. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for listening to Haven's Landscape of Loss. If you found it helpful to hear this story and are going through a loss journey of your own, or supporting someone else who is, consider subscribing on wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you found this episode helpful and you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with loved ones, post about it on social media, and leave a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. Finally, to learn more and get even more resources about the loss journey or to send a healing gift, please visit havenmidwest.org, and while you're there, consider donating. This podcast is made possible by our partners at Tellwell, listeners like you, and folks willing to share their stories so we can all heal together.
You are